I'm J.R. Church. Welcome to today's analysis of the news. You recall on yesterday, I mentioned that the United Nations had, shall we say, neglected to put up a speech by Ban Ki-moon. Actually, they put the speech up, I'm told, and it was there for a few hours until some of our people in Washington, D.C. got wind of it, and they demanded that the UN pull that speech and bury it. Otherwise, the United States would stop supporting the United Nations altogether. Well, it was a pretty raunchy speech wherein Ban Ki-moon was asking the General Assembly to not just censure Israel, but to remove Israel's membership in the United Nations. And everything he had to say about the United States by implication and the Israeli government by name was very troubling. Obviously, I gave the basis of the speech on Monday, and then we pulled it off of our website because I could not find it on the United Nations News Center website. But I am told that it was there at one time, and then our people in Washington, D.C., senators, representatives, kicked up about it, and Ban Ki-moon had to pull his speech. It was also on an Israeli news site for a while, and they pulled it, and so nobody will admit its validity. All I can tell you is that maybe it was real. Nevertheless, we pulled it from our website because it was so extreme. Ban Ki-moon said that the United Nations never had anything to do with the establishment of the Jewish state. Well, I happen to have before me the resolution passed on November 29th, 1947. It's called United Nations General Assembly Resolution 181. And I want to read just a few things from this resolution to give you an idea of what the UN wanted to do back in 1947-48. It says here, the General Assembly having met in special session at the request of the mandatory power, that is the British, to constitute and instruct a special committee to prepare for the consideration of the question of the future government of Palestine at the second regular session. Having constituted a special committee and instructed it to investigate all questions and issues relevant to the problem of Palestine and to prepare proposals for the solution of the problem, and having received and examined the report of the special committee. Now remember, Britain had complete control of that area ever since 1917. And so here we are, 1917, 27, 37, 47, 30 years later. The British want to throw up their hands and quit and get out of the area and turn it over to the United Nations. So the UN sent this group, a commission, to look over the situation between the Jews and the Arabs. And they came back and suggested that it would be okay to establish a Jewish state and an Arab state, independent of each other, and for the city of Jerusalem to be run by the UN. So, here's the plan of the partition. This says the mandate for Palestine, that is the British mandate, begun on in November or December of, I think it's December the 9th, 1917. The mandate shall terminate as soon as possible, but in any case not later than August 1, 1948. So the mandatory power, that is the British, shall advise the Commission, the UN Commission, as far in advance as possible of its intention to terminate the British mandate and to evacuate each area. The mandatory power shall use its best endeavors to ensure that an area situated in the territory of the Jewish state, including a seaport and a hinterland, adequate to ensure, to provide facilities for a substantial immigration, shall be evacuated at the earliest possible date and in any event not later than February 1st, 1948. So the British have to be out not later than February 1948. Independent Arab and Jewish states and the special international regime for the city of Jerusalem set forth in Part 3 of this plan shall come into existence in Palestine 2 months after the evacuation of the armed forces of the mandatory power. That's when the British leave. 2 months later, these three things will kick in. That's the plan. Well, 2 months later, it happened. February 1st and March and April and May the 14th, 1948, the Jewish state was established. The British left, and down came the British flag, and up went the new Israeli flag. And the Arabs had their opportunity under the Commission of the United Nations to establish their state at that time. Well, so why didn't they? They didn't have any organizational ability about them. They didn't know what to do, which way to turn. They didn't have any politicians. They didn't have any smarts. They did not understand what was going on. They understood what was going on enough to where when Israel declared its independence in Tel Aviv, then they shut down Jerusalem, put up the Mandelbaum Gate. You remember that? Israel could not get to the old city. And they had to go through a very narrow corridor to get to the western side of Jerusalem. And so this says that the boundaries of the Arab state and the Jewish state and the city of Jerusalem shall be described in parts 2 and 3 below. Now the administration of Palestine shall, as the British withdraws its armed forces, be progressively turned over to the United Nations Commission, which shall act in conformity with the recommendations of the General Assembly under the guidance of the Security Council. The mandatory power shall not take any action to prevent, obstruct, or delay. That is, the British shall not try to prevent, obstruct, or delay the implementation by the Commission of the measures recommended by the General Assembly. On its arrival in Palestine, the UN Commission shall proceed to carry out measures for the establishment of the frontiers of the Arab and Jewish states and the city of Jerusalem in accordance with the general lines of the recommendations of the General Assembly on the partition of Palestine. They were going to cut it up between the Jews and the Arabs. Well, they say if by April 1st, 1948, a provisional council of governments cannot be selected for either of the states, or if selected cannot carry out its functions, the Commission shall communicate that fact to the Security Council. Well, as a matter of fact, the Jews were ready to go ahead with their state. The British were ready to leave. And the British had to leave, okay? But the Palestinians were not ready to establish their state. In fact, they haven't lifted one little finger to try to establish that in the years since 1948. Here says, the Commission shall instruct the